Wow, it is good to be here. You know, one of the things I hate following after Paul is when you have a good-looking guy like that, it just makes you feel kind of insecure, right? I got to come after that guy. You got to stick up here like this dorky little old man, behind that stud before you, right? And so I always get a little bit intimidated, but it is good to be here with all of you today, and it's a great delight. I don't feel like I'm a guest speaker here. I just feel like I'm part of family. This church has been a part of my life for so long. This church has been a blessing to our church. As they helped us along our journey when we first planted our church 21 years ago. They examined our elders, they examined our deacons. They have been a wonderful encouragement and partner to us. And so on behalf of our church, we send our greetings and our prayers, especially as you're going through this transition. And today, if you are new here, we welcome you, and I hope that I do not discourage you from coming back. Don't let me be the guy that says, I don't want to come back. I'm only here for one day. So you know what? It would only get better. Because you see, as she mentioned, you're going to get a guest speaker every month. They started with the worst and will only get better, right? That's what they have to do. You can't start with the best and get worse. It doesn't work that way. So that's why I'm glad that I got invited. So I want to thank the session for allowing me to come. And I want those who are new today to know what a wonderful church this is. The reason why is because I have so many wonderful friends here that are godly, who love the Lord, who are gracious and merciful. It's been a delight for me to be friends with them for all these years. So please come back and to get to know these people and to give this church a chance. It's a wonderful church and a great place. And I'm so grateful for New Life Presbyterian Church, indeed. But this morning, I have to ask you to open your Bibles to the book of Matthew, chapter 11. And we're going to be looking at verses 28 through 30. Matthew 11, verses 28 through 30. And this is the reading of God's holy and precious word. May you pay close attention to it. Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Amen. May God bless the reading and the preaching of his word. Speaking of working out, I was at the gym a couple of months ago, and this guy came up to me and said, you know what? We come to the gym and we work out and we work hard, right? And we pay to work out, right? You got to pay your membership fee. But you know what? We love it. But then we go to work and we hate what we do and we get paid to do what we have to do and we hate it. And that's why today I thought about what would I like to stress to all of you today is this idea of rest. Rest. Obviously, this is MLK weekend. I know that many people are away to get away for the weekend itself. And perhaps the reason why they get away is because of the reality is that we all need this idea of rest. And this idea of rest is so hard for us to practice. Why? Because we live in a crazy and absolutely a busy world, a world that celebrates busyness. Think about it. We are now busier than ever before. Even our work, we have a thing called remote work, but that's not really remote, is it, right? We say it's remote because you get to work from home, but yet you work more at home than you ever did before because now you are always on call, right? Before you worked from 8 to 5 and that was it, but now you're like working from 8 to 8, you right? 24 hours a day. There's never a break in your day. You're always at work. And there are no longer any more boundaries between work and life. This idea of work-life balance seems to be gone. Why? Because you see, work has invaded our homes. Our phones are attached to our hips. We're always on call, and we are always busy. That's why we're always in a hurry. That's why we're always trying to rush wherever we go. Isn't it true? Think about your life right now, right? I'll tell you what my life is like in the morning, right? I wake up, I make 7 cups of coffee, right, for me and my wife, right? We got to drink our coffee, right? And then we get up, we prepare breakfast, and I just got a dog. Right? So now I got to walk the dog in the morning, right? Make breakfast, walk the dog, get the kids ready for school, right? We get them to school, and then I get to do my work, right? And then at 3 o'clock, I get my second cup of coffee. I go to Starbucks, get my grounded coffee. Why? Because I start my second job, which is what? I got to pick up my kids from practice, right? Or take them from school and then get them to practice, right? And after practice, I got to pick them up for practice. And then we got to feed them dinner, right? And after dinner, we got to help them with the homework. And after homework, I got to finish the rest of my work off. And then after I finish my rest of my work off, I got to walk the dog again so he can do his thing, right, at night. And after I walk the dog, I got to wash the dog, and I got to dress up, go to sleep. And before you know it, that's nighttime. Time to go to bed. And then next morning, I wake up, I do the same thing, right? And I know that's your life too, right? Our lives are absolutely nuts. You're like, yeah, that's about right. That's about right. And kids, your life is no different. My daughter said to me, Dad, my life is crazy. Her life is crazier than mine. She's got to get up earlier because she's got zero period at 7:30, right? She goes to school all day. She's got soccer practice, track practice, whatever after school. And after track practice over school, she comes over to eat dinner. And after dinner, she's got to do her ASB thing. She got to do her Torrance Youth Council thing. After she finishes that, then she comes home and she does her homework. And she's absolutely nuts as well. This is our lives, all of our lives. We are absolutely busier than ever before. And for many of us, we boast about our busyness. It almost feels like, you know what, we're busy, we feel like we're important. We feel like we're indispensable. When people ask us, how are you doing? We're like, I'm busy. And we feel good when we say that, right? When people ask, how are you doing? And we have nothing to say, then it makes us feel like we're a loser at that point. And that's why we say we're so busy. Why? Because it makes us feel important. It makes us feel like that we are somebody. And it's because of our busyness that we can't even come to worship on the Lord on the Sabbath day. On Sundays, we can't even give God 1 day, 1.5 hours to worship Him. Why? Because we are so busy. Even right now, some of you are probably on your phones right now because you're doing something for work or perhaps fantasy or for the playoffs or whatever it may be. But the reality is that you and I are absolutely busy. We're overwhelmed. We become slaves to our business, to our work, to our activities, to our families, or to the things that we feel that we need to do. We're overwhelmed indeed. And no wonder we are all so exhausted. You know, as I get older, I realize my greatest asset is diminishing, right? You know what my greatest, in my mind, my greatest asset is my energy, right? They used to call me Scooter because I just go all over the place, right? Even right now, I'm preaching fast as I can, right? I have a lot of energy, right? But as I get older, that energy is diminishing, right? And I'm getting tired. I'm overwhelmed as well. And so often, because we're so overwhelmed, what do we try to do? We try to find that rest, right? We try to go to sleep. We try to get away. Some of us, we turn to Netflix. We try to, drown our minds watching, whatever video or whatever movies online or whatever it may be. Some of us turn to alcohol. Some of us turn to other narcotics or other substances. We will do whatever we can to find that rest, to find that renewal, to find that refreshment. But so often we find that you know what? It may offer temporary relief, but they fail to give us what we long for, which is rest. Rest. Haven't you ever been on vacation? You said to yourself when you got back that, man, I need another vacation. Yeah, maybe for that brief moment you felt rested, but then you get back and you still realize how tired you are. Or when you go to sleep and you wake up, you feel like, you know what? I feel like I didn't sleep at all. And so often these things don't provide the rest that you and I are all longing for, the rest that we all need. And perhaps the reason why is because we're looking in all the wrong places for the source of our rest. So often we think that what we need is physical rest, which is cessation from our work, cessation from our activity, cessation from whatever we do. That if I could just do nothing, then I will be at rest. But that is not the case. You see, what we need is not simply physical rest in our lives. But what we ultimately need is rest for our souls. Rest for our souls. The reason why all these other things cannot give us true rest is because they do not give us rest for our souls. They give us physical rest. They give us that temporary relief, but they never address the reality of our soul. For that is where true rest is found, when your soul is at rest. And that is the beauty of what we hear in this gracious invitation. Come unto me, all who labor and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Rest for what? Rest for your soul. Have you ever thought about what can give rest to my soul? Will Netflix, will sleep, will that address the issue of your soul? It cannot. But there is one who can. You see, Christ simply invites us to come. He says, come to me, and I love this. I can imagine people just running around, and he simply says to the people, come to me. He does not qualify how you are to come. He does not say, come when you have everything together, come when you are good, come when you are perfect, come when you are just overwhelmed. No. He doesn't say, come tomorrow. He says, come now. There are no qualifications. He says, come to me. He didn't say come to God, but he says come to me. And this had to be absolutely shocking. Why? For the people of Israel believed that it was only God who can give you rest. And for Jesus to say, come to me, what is he acknowledging? He's telling them that he himself is God. As a matter of fact, in verse 27, he says, all things have been handed over to me by my Father, and no one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son, and anyone to whom the Son chooses to reveal him. In other words, God has given all things to his Son. What he's saying to them is this, come to me, I am God, manifested in the flesh. And you may begin to wonder, can I really come? Can I come with all of my faults? Can I come with all of my brokenness? Can I come with all of my sins? Can I come with all of my... Can I come simply as I am? And he says, yes. He says, come to me all. All. He didn't say, come to me some. He says, come to me all. It doesn't matter where you're from. It doesn't matter where you've been. It doesn't matter what you have done. Your race does not matter. Your socioeconomic class does not matter. He says all, which means everyone, every sinner, every sufferer, everyone that's broken, everyone who is weary, everyone who is heavy laden. He says, come to me. You see, that is the invitation. He could have said, come to the rich. He says, you who are rich, come to me. Come you who are beautiful. Come you who are influencers. Come to me, everyone who has got everything together. No, instead he says, come to me all. All who what? Labor and are heavy laden. And we see the beauty and the love of Christ. We see the compassion of Christ. He says, come to me all who labor and are heavy laden. He invites us to come because he recognizes that you and I live in a broken and fallen world. We live in a world of suffering. We live in a world of hardship. And he graciously invites us to come. Not because we're righteous, not because we are worthy, but because we are heavy laden. We labor and we're exhausted and we are tired. And he uses two words to describe our weariness. Those who labor and those who are heavy laden. Because you see, often our labor and our weariness and our fatigue comes from reality of two things, inward and outward. Right? Why do we labor? You see, that is the inward angst that you and I experience. We labor because we're trying to make something of our lives. We labor because we want to be somebody. We labor because we want to be loved. We labor because we want to be known. And there is that inward angst that weighs us down. And that's why we work so hard to satisfy that angst that's inside of our lives. And this idea of heavy laden are those things that are on the outside of our lives. Those things that are out of our control. Perhaps these are our debts. Perhaps it's our family relationships or relationship issue. Perhaps these are things that you feel guilty about. These are things that are outside of your control, and they just weigh down on you, right? And how overwhelming these things can be. And they just break you. This year has been a very difficult start for me and my friends. I had 3 friends who have lost their fathers within the past 2 weeks. 3 friends who lost their fathers in 2 weeks. I have friends that are now dealing with cancer, who are struggling. And you can only imagine how that burden, that sense of out of controlness just weighs down on you. And how exhausted you are. Not only do you have the inward angst, you have the outward pressure. And that's why he says, all you who labor and are heavy are laden. He's covering every ground because he knows we are exhausted, we are weary from things that we cannot control and the things that are inside of us that are just overwhelming us with guilt and hardship. And he says to you, come. Come. He knows that we are overwhelmed and tired. But the question is, do you know how overwhelmed and tired you are? You will not come to him unless you recognize you are tired. For many of us, we don't feel like we're tired. We don't want to acknowledge our tiredness. Because we live in this rat race. We live in this world that emphasizes to be busy is excellent. And we feel like to be busy is to be normal. That we have to be busy or else we're going to be deemed lazy or we're going to fall behind. But here's the reality, my friends. The reality is that we are exhausted. We are tired. That's why you cannot sleep. That's why you're always anxious. That's why you're always overwhelmed. That's why you're often arrogant. That's why you're rude. That's why you're always angry. Why? Because you're so tired and exhausted. Right? Think about when you're tired. How do you act? You're not very pleasant to be with. Right? Because you're exhausted and tired. For many of you, maybe that's why you're angry. That's why you're so arrogant. That's why you're so unpleasant. Because you're absolutely exhausted. And are you willing to recognize that reality? That you are heavy laden and that you are burdened. But here's the beauty of it all. Even though you acknowledge that, you still can come to him and he will give you that rest. Not only physical rest, but rest for your soul. But not only do we come to find that rest, but he tells us, take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. He knows that we are weary and heavy laden, but what does he say? Take my yoke upon you. And perhaps you're thinking, that's the last thing that I would want. Why would I want a yoke? Why would I want something I have to put on? When I'm already exhausted, I'm already overwhelmed, right? It seems like a very unreasonable task or a command by Christ, knowing that I'm weary and heavy laden. But what is a yoke? For those of you who are younger here, the yoke is a wooden bar that was placed upon oxen to pull a plow to do work, right? In other words, it was an instrument that you used for you to work, right? And for it could be that yoke was put on a single oxen, or that yoke can be put on two oxen, where there was a weaker ox and a stronger ox. And what happened when you had two oxen and that yoke was placed upon both of them, the stronger ox would help the younger ox to do the work. As a matter of fact, so often the stronger ox will do more of the work because then the burden will not fall upon the weaker ox itself. And so therefore the yoke, it would be heavy, but it was absolutely necessary in order for you to do the work. And here Jesus talking to these people who are exhausted and weary, and he's telling them, you got to put on an instrument that will make you to do more yoke. But understand why he's telling them to take his yoke. You see, because they're already carrying a yoke. You see, none of us are yokeless. We're all having a yoke that enables us to do the work that you and I are doing. A yoke that enables us to do the work in our lives and to carry our burdens. We all have a yoke. When he's telling you to take on my yoke, he's telling you to get rid of your yoke. And understand who Jesus was. Jesus was not also, what did he do for his earthly living? He was a carpenter. And what do you think he made? He made yokes, right? He made yokes. He knew that, you know what? If the yoke was not a right fit, it would be a burden upon that animal. And by telling us to when he says take on my yoke, he's telling you get rid of your yoke because my yoke is easy. My burden is light. You see, it would have been easy for him to say, you're heavy, you're tired, you're weary. You know what? Don't do anything. Take a vacation. Go and relax. That's not how life works. We just cannot do anything. Right? We can't just say, you know what? Forget it. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to live life. We'll do whatever I want. Not have a care in the world. That's not responsible. No, what he does is that, you know what? He's going to enable us to do that work in a radically different way. And the way that we do that work in a radically different way is by putting on his yoke. His yoke is far better. His yoke is easy and his burden is light. Whereas the burden that they were carrying was hard and unbearable. And that's why they are restless. That's why they are weary and that's why they're burning. Why? Because they were carrying the wrong yoke. And what was that yoke that they were carrying? For the people that he's addressing here, right in our passage, it was the yoke of religion. The yoke of religion. Why? Because you see, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the teachers of the law, told the people of God that you need to do this and this and this and this. They added on to the very law of God, put a burden on the people, where they say you have to do all these things in order for God to accept you. In order for God to love you, you can't do this on this day, you got to do this on this day. And they added on to the law all these rules and regulations and said, if you don't do these things, then God will not love you. God will not accept you. You will not be righteous in the eyes of God. And for the people, what were they trying to do? They're trying to merit and they're trying to earn God's love by doing all of these things. Marking off with checks, I did this and I did this, and maybe if they felt good about themselves, that I'm doing this all for God. And yet during the whole process, they're getting absolutely weary and tired, obeying this and doing that and doing this and doing that they were overwhelmed. They were striving relentlessly and tirelessly to do all these things in order to please God, wondering whether or not, have I done enough? Have I done enough to please God? Will I now be accepted by God? You can imagine what a burden that is. Wondering, is it ever enough? Working so hard, trying to please God, doing all these religious things. And Christ says, no, take my yoke and learn from me. The same way, perhaps that's the yoke that you're carrying. The yoke of religion. You go to church, you pray, you do your devotions, you obey, not because you want to, but because you feel like you have to. You feel like you need to do all these things in order to please God and to be accepted by Him. You feel like you got to do all these things before God in order for God to love you. What a burden. That's why coming to church is a burden. That's why obeying God's word is a burden. It's not because you want to, it's because you feel like you have to in order for you to please God in that way. You see, not only the yoke of religion, but there's always a work behind the work that we do in every aspect of our lives. And what drives that work that we do? Pastor Tim Keller points out that there is a work beneath the work that makes us weary. A work beneath the work that makes us weary. What does he mean by that? For example, why do you work so hard in your careers? It's not the work itself that's overwhelming and overbearing. But it's that work of significance, right? You do the work in order for that you can feel significant. We make our work the ultimate thing because the work underneath that work tells us unless we achieve, unless that we succeed, that you and I are a nobody or that you and I are somebody. That's why we feel like we got to get promoted. That's why we feel like we got to get that position. Why? I got to get that. Why? Or else I am a nobody. It's that work of trying to be somebody that makes your work absolutely exhausted. And I've seen this in my son. My son who's a sophomore at UCLA, right? My son in his freshman, college is different now how when we went to school, by the way. When we went to school, we messed around. We had a good old time, right? Internship, whatever, right? We had a great time. These kids today, nah. You think getting to college was the end goal? No. When you get there, you got to drive. You got to work hard. My son tried to try out for 30 clubs. 30 clubs at UCLA, business clubs, right? He's a business major there, right? 30 clubs, internship, consulting, iBanking, whatever it may. You know how many he got into? 0. Bro, loser, right? He tried out for 30 clubs. Man, this guy was hustling, doing all these things, right? And you can see the angst in his life. He was very unpleasant. He would call us all the time. I thought my son will never call us when he was in college. He calls us all the time. My life's miserable. This is so hard. Why am I doing this, right? Yeah, because you got into 0 clubs for trying to apply to 30. And you know what he said to me? Dad, I got to get it. I said, dude, it's not the end of the world. It's not everything. No, Dad, you don't understand. It is everything. If I don't get into a club, I can't get that internship. If I can't get that internship, I can't get that job. And if I can't get that job, then what will I be? I will be a nobody. He was so driven to get into a club. Why? Because he felt like if I don't do this, then I am a nobody. I will not succeed. I will not get ahead in this world. And we feel the same way. That's why we work so hard. Why? Because we feel like, you know what? I need to feel significant. I need that job for my sense of approval. Just like Harold Abrams, who ran a 1924 Olympics 100-meter dash for England. If you ever watched Chariots of Fire, you know the 2 runners in that movie. Harold Abrams was an absolute miserable character in that movie itself, if you watch it. So stressed out, so angry, so unpleasant. And he turned to his girlfriend. There's this one line in that movie when he turns to his girlfriend. And do you know what he says to her? He says, I have 10 seconds to justify my existence. I have 10 seconds to justify my existence. If I don't win, then I don't have any reason to exist. You talk about exhausting. You talk about overwhelming. That is overwhelming, my friends. Yet we feel the same way. But it's not only that yoke of significance. You know what? It could be that yoke of love, right? The yoke of, you know what? The expectation of others. We feel that we need to please our parents. We feel like we got to please our wives. We got to please our children. We got to do everything for them. Why? So that we can be loved. So that we can be accepted. So that I can say I'm a good husband. So I can say I'm a good father. So I can say I'm a good friend. And we go through all these crazy things to prove ourselves that, you know what? I am a good father. I am a good husband. I'm a good wife, whatever it may be. And that expectation of trying to be that good father, that good friend, that good husband, absolutely crushes. That's why you do all these things at home. That's why you do all these things for your kids. Because there's that underlying work that says, if I don't do this, then I'm a failure, that I won't be loved, that I will be abandoned. Because you see, all of these yokes, they promise you the world, but yet they never ever satisfy. They make demands on you, and those demands never end. Because when will it ever be enough? And when we fail to meet these demands, they crush us. They devastate us. Because we feel like we have no reason to exist. You see, that is the work from our soul. You see, that work from the soul is what drives us to the work that we do physically. And that is what makes us completely exhausted indeed. It is because of the fact that we're so restless, we're so always chasing after all these things. It makes us bitter and that makes us angry about life. People are trying to hold on to these things for dear life at all costs. Just recently, a friend of mine asked me, James, what if the best years are behind us? I'm over 50 now. I was like, oh, that's kind of sad reality, right? What if the best is behind us? And he said, you know what? Because we think the best is behind us, what do we try to do? We try to hold on. And because we try to hold on, what do we become? Very abusive, very controlling, because of the fact that we feel like if I lose this, then what am I? That's why we become very bitter and we become very angry. And we're so restless. And that's why he says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart. He said, take my yoke and what? Learn from me. The word learn means to be my disciple. And being a disciple sounds tiring, but what does it mean to learn from him? Learn from me. It means to trust in what he has done for you. It means to start letting go of your control and learning to trust in what he has done from you. What is it that we learn from him? What do we learn from that? He is gentle and lowly in heart. When he says, learn from me, what he wants us to learn is that he is gentle and lowly in heart. Unlike the yoke of the world, which is an absolute cruel taskmaster who makes demands on us, who try to crush us and destroy us, we see that Christ is the one who says, I am gentle and lowly in heart. That he's not there to destroy us or to get us, but that he is the one who's out there to save us. He gently restores when you and I fail. He's the one that comes alongside to comfort us in the midst of our hardship and our sufferings. He is the one that tells us that I love you and I receive you. But not only that he's gentle, but he says that he is lowly in heart. That what do we learn from him? That he is the one who did not come to serve, but the one who came to serve. That he is our servant. The reason why that his yoke is easy and his burden is light, because he is the one who carries this burden with us. He is the one who enters that yoke. He is the one who is that stronger ox that carries this yoke with us. And when you and I feel like we cannot carry on, he is the one who carries that burden for us. He is gentle and lowly in heart. And we see the gentleness and the lowliness of Christ when he desired to be yoked with us. For he is the one who became like you and me, who was willing to become obedient to death, even death on a cross, who being the very nature of God did not consider equality with God, but made himself nothing, taking the form of a servant. He humbled himself. He is the one who was gentle and lowly in heart to carry our burdens and our sins and be nailed to a cross. Why? So that you and I can be set free. You see, everything in the world, the idols of this world, tells you to do what? Serve it. Do what it tells you to do in order for you to be blessed. But we see that Christ is the one who has come to serve us. He is the one who gave up himself up so that we can have a life. It's because he is gentle and lowly in heart that you and I are loved and accepted by God. It's because he is gentle and lowly in heart that we don't have to earn or merit his love. It's because what he has done, we know that God is for us because he is the one who took our condemnation upon that cross. It's because of what he has done, we know that no one can condemn us. It's because of what he has done that he is gentle and lowly in heart. There is no one that can bring an accusation against us. It's because of what he has done, because he's gentle and lowly in heart. We know that there's absolutely nothing that will ever separate us from the love of Jesus Christ. That we will always be loved, we will always be accepted, we will always be his. Because he is the one who is gentle and lowly in heart. In other words, he says, it is finished. The work is done. So that we don't have to do that work that's beneath that work. And that is why we find rest for our souls. You see, that is the ultimate rest that he provides. For he says, I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. You see, that is the rest that we need, more than any physical rest. We can rest because he is the one who said, it is finished. The work is done. He is the one who fulfilled the law's demands. He is the one who satisfies God's righteousness for us. Don't you see how much Christ has loved you and me? He's telling you, get off your yoke. Let me give you a better yoke. A yoke that does not drive you to be accepted, but a yoke that tells you that you already are accepted. Not a yoke that tells you that you have to get loved. He tells you already are loved. You come from a different position, not from a position of bankruptcy, but a position of fullness where you know that you're accepted and loved and received. Then you can go forth and do this work. Why? Because that work does not make you somebody. That work does not make you loved. That work does not make you accepted because you already are. We don't have to prove our worth because we know that we are so loved. And that is why his yoke is easy and his burden is light. Do you understand that? For it's when you see the beauty and the loveliness of Christ and how he loves you, his commands are not a burden, but they are absolutely a delight. Imagine this. Imagine you are in a marriage, right? If my wife Sora said to me, honey, take out the trash, vacuum the floors, clean the house, wash my cars, clean the toilets, right? I'd be like, whoa, to pick up the kids, take the kids home, make them dinner, make them breakfast, walk the dog, take out the dog. I'd be like, woman, stop, right? I'd be like, enough is enough, right? You'd be like so overwhelmed, right? She's telling you to do all these things, and here I am trying to do, and I do all these things. Why? Because I know if I don't do it, guess what happens? My wife gets all mad, right? So I do these things. I don't want to get her mad, right? I'm like working like a dog, trying to do all these things, right? Because I don't want to get my wife mad. That's exhausting. Your marriage is not going to work. That's why for so many people, marriages work. I got to do all these things. Why? Because I'm not going to be loved by my spouse. But if Sora said to me, honey, I love you. I'm so glad I married you. I'm the luckiest woman in the world. Can you please take out the trash? I'll be like, oh, yeah. I take out the trash, vacuum the floors, whatever, mop the floors, whatever, clean the house. What else do you want me to do, right? You'd be like, I'll be willing to do it anytime, anyhow, anyway. Why? Because you know that you don't need to do these things in order for you to be loved. It's when you already know that you are loved that it's an absolute delight to do that work. That's why I always say that I don't have to do these things. I get to do these things. I don't have to clean the toilets. I get to clean the toilets, right? I don't have to pick up my kids. I get to pick up my kids. I don't have to walk my dog. I get to walk my dog. I get to serve my wife. I get to serve my family because I love them. You see, that's the difference. And when you start being like that, you know what? You're not bitter. You're not angry. You're not using people to get what you want. You're not using them so that you can be satisfied. You're not using them so that you can be made whole. No, you're already whole. You're already accepted. You're already loved. And now you can freely love them the way that they ought to be loved. You can love your kids. You can love your wife. You can love your family. You can love your enemy. You can love your friends the right way without using them so that they can feel an emptiness and a void in your life. You see, that's why he says, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. But you see, the only way that burden will be easy, that the yoke will be easy and the burden will be light, is if you know that he is gentle and lonely in heart. Because if you do not know that, and all you see are the commands, you will say, what a burden, what a hardship, it is too much. It is when you realize that he is gentle and lonely in heart. You learn from him, then you will be glad to do the work that God has called you to do. You have to know and to come to him first, so that you can find rest for your souls. You see, in that movie, Chariots of Fire, I told you there was another man that ran. His competitor named Eric Liddell. He also ran for Scotland. But this is a man that loved the Lord. As a matter of fact, he loved the Lord so much that when he came for the 100-meter dash in the 1924 Paris Olympics, he landed on a Sunday. He said, I cannot run this race on Sunday. For he was a strict Sabbatarian. And so he forfeited that race. Why? Because you see, for him, honoring God was more important than honoring himself. But there was this one line in that movie for Eric Liddell. His sister was really upset that he was not going to the mission field because he was supposed to be a missionary. She was, what are you wasting your time running? And you know what he responded to her and said? He says, no. He says, when I run, I feel God smile. When I run, I feel God smile. He does not run because he needs some glory or some accolade or some gold medal. He ran because of the fact he realized, I get to run. And when I run, I feel God's pleasure on me. Here's a man that said, I have 10 seconds to justify my existence. And another man who said, when I run, I feel God's smile. I want to ask you, who is free? They both ran the same race. They were both doing the same things. But one was absolutely miserable and exhausted, whereas the other one was absolutely full of delight, full of joy, and very pleasant. It's because one did not need to win in order to be somebody, but one who recognized he was already somebody because of what Christ has done for him. And that's why we take on that yoke, and that we learn from him. For he's gentle and lowly in heart. My dear friends, today, are you weary and heavy laden? Why? Maybe because of the fact that you turn to these things for your source of significance, approval, love, and acceptance. I'll tell you what, you will never find it in those things. But there is another option, that you can come to Christ, who is gently and lonely in heart, who has loved you, died for you, so that you will always be his, so that you will always be accepted, so that you will know that you are children of God, you are co-heirs with Christ, that you already have everything you ever dreamed of in him, so that now you can go forth and do the work of parenting, do the work, whatever job you may have, with a different mindset, that I get to do these things to serve my God, who has loved me so much. So dear friends, come to Jesus, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and he will give you rest. Let us pray. Just a brief moment. Are you tired and are you weary? What is that work underneath your work? Is it fame, love, acceptance, glory? Then come to Jesus. Learn from him, who is gentle and lowly in heart. If you feel like Christianity is such a burden, it's such a hard thing, it's because maybe you don't realize that Jesus is gentle and lowly in heart. So can we spend a moment reflecting and coming to him today? Father, we thank you for your gracious invitation. For you call us to come to you, all who are weary and heavy laden. And God, we're tired. We live in a crazy world. I know for some here today, maybe they're overwhelmed. But I pray that, God, that they will come to you today to know that you are gentle and lowly in heart. That, God, that no matter what burden that they may have, that, God, that you are there to carry it with them. And that, God, perhaps, Lord, there is that work that's underneath that work that drives them. I pray that, God, that they will know that you've come to serve so that, God, that they could be set free. That, God, that we're accepted and loved and that we're significant because of the one who went to the cross and died so that we may have life. So, God, may we come and find our rest in you, rest for our souls. And I pray that, God, that you would truly meet them and help them. God, we give you all the glory. And in Jesus' name.